Hello and welcome to another rankings special on the Football History Boys YouTube channel. Now today we're going to be going through the entirety of football history to look at football's most important decades, the periods of 10 years that have shaped the game we know and love today. We're using Tier Maker to do this, and we've chosen 5 different tiers. We have the greatest, so one decade in particular will go up there as being the greatest decade in football history. We have very important, down to significant, underrated, and finally we just have one that just says 10 years. Just 10 years. Not that significant, not much going on.
Fine.
We have every single decade of codified football from the 1860s all the way up to the 2020s. I know 2020s isn't 10 years yet, but we'll make our predictions as to how it's going so far. I mean, we could argue 1860s is also not 10 years because 1863 onwards. There we go. Before we start, anything in particular jumping out to you on this list?
I think it's going to be interesting to reminisce on some of these in terms of how they've changed the game that we know and love today, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We're not just looking at were they significant at the time, but do they still have a lasting impact on football that we know and we love and we enjoy today? I think we're going to have to shift the greatest around. Maybe we'll stick something in the greatest as we go and move it down if something beats it.
Yeah, good point. And I think everyone will have their own subjective opinions on these, probably linked to the clubs they support or the nations they support. So please let us know what you think by clicking the link in the comments below, in the description below. There is a link to this tier maker for you to all have a go yourself. Right, let's get started. Let's start at the beginning. 1860s, football's birth, codified football's birth, 1863. Come on then, what are we thinking?
Straight away, I think we've got to put this in probably the very important category because of the fact that it codified football for the first time. The Football Association is founded in 1863, and without that, we don't have football as we know it. I'm sure it would have happened eventually.
Yeah.
But this is the time that it gets done. This is the time.
1860 as well, the first match between Sheffield FC and Hallam as well. Yeah. The Uden Cup. Forms of the first cup competition as well, which is obviously really important. So loads of things there to think about. I think I'd agree. I'd be very important.
Maybe just significant.
Significant. Yeah, you know what? Significant. Because other than that, not much happened. And
yeah, that's fair.
It actually was quite a slow growth, the FA in football. It wasn't immediately popular. I think some of us have this idea or are told that football was instantly popular and everyone loved it, but that wasn't the case. Rugby was arguably more popular at first.
And not everyone adopted the rules at the same time.
And they did, different rules out there. 1860s, significant, right in the middle. I already think that's going to be controversial. Right, 1870s then, the next period of 10 years. This is, I think, very important purely because the FA Cup is formed, the first international is played, the steps are starting to come into place where working class football teams are starting to be formed.
Professionalisation starts to be a factor.
Yeah, like very hidden professionalisation. What are we thinking?
For me, I agree. I think it is very important. The FA Cup, whilst it's lost significantly in recent time, maybe still the greatest cup competition of all time.
It is. I think 1870s also. The FAW was formed there, so a little Welsh one for us there. Okay, 1880s. Now, we know this for us as the decade of the Football League.
Yeah.
We also know it as the decade of professionalism being accepted. What are we thinking?
Yeah, incredibly important for the Football League. We see leagues being played for the first time, teams travelling regularly across the country to play each other, and that whole concept of supporting your team across a season rather than just in the FA Cup. And it is important. It is important because of the professionalisation of the game. You finally can get paid for this talent that you've got. Mm-hmm. You don't have to work in a factory anymore. You don't have to work down the mine. You can go and play football full time.
Exactly. And Ireland are formed as a football association as well, which makes the home championships really start properly, which is international football coming even bigger and more important to people.
Very important.
Very important. It is. Fantastic. Okay, 1890s. Now, quite a few big clubs were formed during this time.
Your club.
Liverpool. But maybe a bit more forgotten.
Yeah, quieter, isn't it? I think it is a quieter decade. When we talk about historical significance, you don't necessarily have a huge amount from the 90s other than the founding of those football clubs.
Yeah.
which is significant just for the club. So I think this could be our first just 10 years.
This is just 10 years.
Just 10 years.
Just 10 years.
Growth of the game, but nothing significant.
Continued growth.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit dull. Right, let's move on then. 1900s. Now, obviously, the biggest thing here is the founding of FIFA.
1904.
Of course, that is a huge impact on football. FIFA arguably now is one of the most powerful things in the world.
Right, you're wrong.
There are more, yeah, exactly. There's more nations in FIFA than there is in the United Nations. So, Gianni Infantino is an incredibly powerful man with a huge influence over not just football, but politics in general. So FIFA is huge. Also, the first, the founder of the PFA, Footballers Union. So
growth of the British Home Championships too in this country.
The Ibrox disaster, of course, one of the biggest tragedies to happen, which of course brings into debate, stadiums, and obviously that carries on, unfortunately, right the way up until 1989 in Hillsborough.
Perhaps this could be a bit of an underrated decade.
I think so.
Because people wouldn't necessarily tell you straight away. They would, the 70s and the 80s and the 60s. But maybe they wouldn't in terms of the actual 1900s themselves.
Yeah, let's put that in.
Underrated.
Okay, 1910s. The 1910s is obviously more significant for the First World War. Lots of footballers going off to fight. The football battalion, the women's football taking off in Britain as a result, filling the void left by the men and doing it really well, having a huge crowd. So, in terms of women's football, this would be very important.
Yes,
it'd be it's the first real foundings of women's football on a massive scale in this country. However, in terms of general football, the fact that it's lost 5 years of the rest of the game has got to have a big impact, hasn't it?
Yeah, perhaps it's just 10 years because of that, because it wasn't just 10 years really, it was only 6 years in some ways.
I think I'm a bit significant.
Okay.
Purely because I think the women's football is very significant.
The growth of the women's game. And
let's
the fact
pop that
people
in there.
kept football going at home.
That's a really good point. The fact that football, even though the war's going on, people still want to football as that means of escape.
I can give you that.
Yeah, go for that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. 1920s, big decade for you and your beloved Cardiff City. FA Cup winners.
Yes.
But
also significant because we start to see radio become a real part of the game.
Yeah, of course.
FA Cup final 1927, the first one ever broadcast live on the radio. Obviously nowadays football, you wouldn't live without football on the TV.
It's what runs football, isn't it?
And the radio was that significant. It was a turning point in football.
It was.
The growth of the attendances post First World War.
Well, and the White Horse final, 300,000 at Wembley. It is, it is the heyday of spectatorship.
And the effective ban on women's football is significant. It is important.
It is. Yeah. It is. I think it's a massive decade, isn't it? It's that kind of regrowth after the First World War.
Chapman,
offside tactics. What do you reckon then? Is it significant or underrated? Significant?
Maybe it's underrated in terms of how important it was. I think it could be considered a lot more significant.
So. Underrated then.
And people would not rate it as highly. When you talk about really important decades, maybe they wouldn't talk about that as one of their key ones. But I think it is underrated.
Okie doke, let's look at the 1930s. I've written about this before. I think this is football. I think that this is football's most underrated decade. The World Cup starts in 1930. And it grows, doesn't it? It goes from South America. Television, the first televised game, the first televised FA Cup final as well. Obviously, the football tells you this wider story of the world and the radical ideologies that are forming. 1936 Olympics, you've got all the stories there with Peru and so on.
1934, the Coppa del Duce.
Yeah, but Mussolini, so, it's the first sports washing, isn't it, as well? It's the first use of sports washing on a massive scale.
Famously, obviously, the England team travelled to Germany and do the Hitler salute.
Do the salute, don't they, as well, which is obviously, shocking. I think this is a real forgotten decade. I think it's underrated.
And quite formative in terms of world game, the World Cup.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think every decade before the Second World War is probably underrated, but I think this one is in particular.
Significantly. Okay.
What do you think? Significant or underrated?
I think it's significant, but I think it's more underrated than it is significant.
Okay, let's do that then.
It should be higher.
3 underrated decades. Right. 1940s, another decade blighted by war. Of course, in the UK, football suspended. We had wartime friendlies, but they're not quite the same. Comes back, the level's a bit lower. They we can't afford lots of equipment after the war.
Yeah,
You know,
attendances are lower. People have other things to
austerity,
focus on. People have other
rationing.
things to focus on.
There's not much to say really here, is there? There's a few things, but I don't think they're of any significance really to football. So I think
It's
10
just
years.
10 years. It is just 10 years.
Okay, let's look at the 1950s. Now, this is where I think we get to the birth of proper
go.
modern football now.
Yeah.
We're going into it. Right, 1950s. I'll just reel off some major incidents. We have the 1950 World Cup,
Yes.
Brazil, Maracanazo,
Yeah.
Miracle on Grass,
Yeah.
huge. We have Hungary, the
Match
Magical
of the century.
Magyars, Match of the Century. We have the Miracle of Bern, straight after
Founding
that.
the European Cup.
The founding of the European Cup in 1955. We have the flooded friendlies with Wolves. We have, unfortunately, things like the Munich disaster as well happening in the 1950s. Pele,
Yeah.
the birth of Pele as a
Explosion
footballing
in
icon.
attendances.
We have Wales getting to the World Cup. I think 1950s, at the moment, in this video, should go up to the greatest.
Yes, yeah, and it
So far.
may drop, but for me, that's got to sit there in the greatest. It's certainly in the conversation for the greatest.
Yes, absolutely. It's a
Football as we
highly
know it
significant.
is founded in the 50s, really.
Yeah,
And I think if you don't know a huge amount about it, check out our website, check out things we've written, other videos we've done, because that is a really, really important.
check out these
Our 2 books.
little plug there. Right, okay. Link in the description below. Right, let's go to the 1960s then.
Interesting.
Massive again. So I think the
Significant
1950s is
British
huge. Well, yeah, it is. But it's also significant. Obviously, 66 World Cup is
Yes.
massive, but it's like colour, isn't it? Some of it's in colour as well,
It's
football.
the beginning of colour.
The 60s is this, social revolution around the whole world, Beatlemania and music and all that link into sport and football, like with George Best, as you mentioned in the previous video. And then you have the moments as well. You've got, Pele, getting even better and better and better. You have the Lisbon Lions in 67, the Football War in 69.
Yes.
Cruyff, really showing what he can do. European Cup growing.
Man United win their first European Cup, which obviously
United as
for
well,
English football.
huge. Yeah.
I think it's a really important decade.
Removal of the maximum wage.
Yeah, which sees obviously the explosion of footballers' wages.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is definitely in the importance a very important category. Significance is very important.
I think significant.
Okay.
Oh, very important.
I think possibly the football for the first time becomes really, really significant.
Yes. Should we go significant? 60s?
Yeah.
This might get some backlash.
You could argue it's higher, and I think people will. Some people remember the 60s as well, obviously, who may end up watching this video and it'll be their first decade.
Yeah, 66 World Cup. It's a good World Cup, isn't it? Okay, right, let's move on to the 1970s. Now, of course, 70s internationally is highly significant. You got 70s Brazil.
Yes.
You got Total Football with the Dutch.
74
You
World
have the
Cup.
Argentina World Cup, another huge example of sports washing on the game. You also have the dominance of Ajax, Bayern, Liverpool, and then right at the end, Nottingham Forest as well in the European Cup. But it is blighted by the unfortunate growth of hooliganism, not just in the UK, but pretty much across football, really. Obviously, it's a huge reflection on the society and the struggles in society in those places, but it had a huge impact on the game and it made the game unsafe.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking?
There's famous articles that come out from this time from newspapers saying that football's on its knees. Football's about to die in some places, certainly in Britain. I think European-wide, it's a big growth because obviously you get things like the founding of the Bundesliga and things like that in the 70s and the growth of Bayern Munich. I would push it higher on a European stage, probably lower on a British stage, so maybe significant.
Significant, but I'm thinking, is it as significant? Can we really put the 60s, or should we put the 60s higher?
Let's move the 60s up and let's stick the 70s into the significant.
Okay, I like that. Good thinking. Okay, 70s significant, but no more than that. Okay, 1980s. Now I think this is going to be pushing that top again. Not for the greatest, not the reasons. I'm not going to call it the greatest decade of all time because its significance historically comes more with tragedy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Even though we have amazing things like the 82 World Cup, in which, this Brazilian team plays Joga Bonito football and it wows the world. Tardelli is screaming in celebration. Maradona, the hand of God and the goal of the century. they're all hugely fantastic moments in football history. However, it is blighted by tragedies as a result of the
Heysel.
Yeah, so Heysel, Bradford Fire, and then Hillsborough, of course. Obviously, a lot of it is to do with the way that governments reacted to the problems that they found in football and the way that they treated fans, unfortunately, hemming them into pens, basically, in these really dangerous arenas, really, which you wouldn't really want to go watch, would you?
No. British football is cast aside by European football, really, isn't it? The ban comes in Europe.
It is.
They don't want anything to do with us here from Britain anymore. And you can see why, because of how bad the state of the game was, really.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to go very important, isn't it? Because obviously, as a result of those incidents, we have the game we have today. Hillsborough example, we've got the Taylor report comes straight after that.
Yes.
Makes all grounds in the UK at least all-seater stadiums,
Yeah.
which has a massive impact on safety and so on. And lessons, unfortunately, took a long time to be learned from things like Hillsborough.
Yeah.
And it's still ongoing now. So I think we can't put it any lower than very important, because we're still feeling the effects of it now.
And it may not be because of the football, because of what happened off the pitch.
Yeah. Some football was brilliant too, having Van Basten 88 as well.
And a lot of people, again, watching the video will remember
it's up for grabs now. Michael Thomas. So I think even for the football, it's pretty memorable. 1990s.
Here's the challenger for the 50s.
This is the challenge now. It's our wording now on the top, the greatest, is what might throw some people off.
Okay. Yes.
Because they might say, well, we think the 1990s is the worst thing to happen to football because it brought in commercialisation on a massive scale, globalisation on a crazy level, Sky TV, television, money. It's all about money now. Arguably though, if you look back at football history, there is moments even in the 1880s where people are writing into newspapers saying football's all about money now. Obviously not nowhere near the levels of the 1990s, but 92, Premier League, Champions League, end of the back pass rule, 3 points for a win in world football, Bosman ruling, 95,
massive.
The 98 World Cup, Ronaldo, Euro 96.
Influx of foreign talent into the Premier League, which made it what it is. Brilliant.
And the whole idea of, being a professional, being a professional footballer before meant you got paid. Now it meant you treated your job professionally.
Playing a big impact in that.
Arsene Wenger, Fergie.
I think it challenges it. I think what you say is right, though. I think people will be angry at this if we put it as the greatest. So let's put it second. Slot it in as second.
Yeah, I'm going to do. I'm going to put it alongside it for now.
Okay.
Right at the top. I'm going to decide at the end.
Okay, fine.
Okay, because we can't put it lower. It's so significant to football, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, moving on then to the 2000s.
No, significant for us because this is our decade of getting into it.
Massive. Yeah, this is from our age of 7 until 17. So that's massive.
Formative football years.
It is. Obviously, lots happens here. Football keeps growing massively. Watch the end of the 2000s, the 90s, and there's a massive difference in the standard of football. We see things like the birth of tiki taka. We see those World Cups, Zidane's headbutt. Fantastic football there. It is massive.
Barcelona.
Pets Barcelona. The miracle of Istanbul.
Mourinho and football and
Greece.
Money. Roman Abramovich. There's so much
billionaires and so on
in that decade. However, I think there's a bit of nostalgia bias in there potentially from us because that's our most important decade. I think it's the expansion of the 90s. The football fan becomes less important and the football brand becomes more important.
Yeah, is it just like 90s 2.0? Is it just like a continuation of that?
The 90s are the trigger points of that. And so perhaps then we slot it down slightly. I think it is definitely significant.
I think it's underrated. Now I've just
reeled it off.
I just reeled off some stuff, but I think it is probably our bias.
When I thought about the 2000s, I wasn't thinking it was significant. And when you look at it.
Let's go underrated. Let's throw a little curveball in there.
Yeah.
Right.
And when people talk about the 2000s in years to come, I think they will say, wow, what a decade.
I think so. I think so.
Great.
2010s. Okay. Let's have a think. 2010 World Cup, terrible. 2014 World Cup, out of this world. 2018 World Cup, good.
VAR.
Tournaments in between. Oh, VAR.
The
Hawkeye.
VAR,
Goal line technology.
goal line technology. The continued sort of, or the social media impact on the game, where we start to see footballers
I think,
even more
yeah.
superstars.
I think this will be a decade in decades to come will be regarded as significant.
Yeah.
It's not very important. It's not the greatest.
No.
It's not underrated either.
I think it could just be 10 years.
It could just be 10 years of football.
10 years of football.
However, right, we can't put it there because of VAR. And VAR is all where anyone talks about now.
However, that was only 2018. If we're debating when 2018 World Cup, we don't see
And it was
it
good
till
there as well,
2020s.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. It's just 10 years.
Wow.
It's just 10 years
10
of...
years where I enjoyed quite a lot of the football, but I can't say there were major turning points other than technology.
Yeah. And Liverpool won the league in 2020, didn't they? So, right.
And Leicester City, yeah, but
Leicester City.
smaller stories, not world stories.
Yeah. Aguero.
Yeah, all that.
Oh, we're just putting 10 years.
Leave it where it is.
Li-
Leave it where it is.
Man City fans going crazy right now. Okay, and finally, the 2020s starts with COVID. It ends so far with this video. Obviously,
We've had 3 of those years.
yeah,
2020 was very strange, obviously, for the whole world.
2021 was very strange as
21
well.
was strange.
Carried on, didn't it?
The World Cup, for me, was great, but Messi won it.
Messi, yeah, big.
The Euros weren't brilliant. We definitely wouldn't say they were the better Euros.
Yeah,
And then when we project forwards, we get the new Champions League coming.
we got the bigger 48 team World Cup
the
coming.
2018 World Cup, which could ruin the World Cup.
VAR.
The
Yeah,
Club World
okay.
Cup, so the World Cup on a club
That's
stage.
yeah.
So that's going
quite
to be
soon.
significant. The change to Champions League is going to upset a lot of people. It could be brilliant, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, I'm not
Not
sure.
there yet.
Mm.
I think this could be a significant decade for football.
Yeah.
And I think it's significant because every game, near enough, is televised across the world, certainly now. Still
Yeah.
not the case in this country, but far more televised than it's ever been before. I think football fans are more angry than they've ever been before.
Oh, social media
Yeah.
really propels that, doesn't it? Right, I think, yeah, significant.
It's going to be significant if it's not yet. And COVID will play a significant part.
It's going to be significant, even if nothing happened remotely important from now
First
on.
3 years were.
COVID makes it. The fact that
Yeah.
we've watched football behind closed doors, it's
Yeah,
that
mind blowing.
that's how I knew COVID was bad. When football got cancelled, I was like, well, here we go.
Yeah.
Right, okay, let's finish there. So, happy with that list so far?
I am happy. I think we need to solve that problem at the top.
Right, how do you solve a problem like the 50s and 90s? Okay, 50s, I think, for the football purist, is
Yeah.
football's best decade.
For football historian.
For the football historian, for us, yeah. 90s, for historical significance and what will be looked back in 100 years to come as most important, I think it'll be the 90s.
Game-changing moments.
Okay. Don't worry about that word, and that says the greatest. That might be what's thrown us off a little bit now. But
Yeah.
I think it is the biggest episode.
If the wording was that football's most important, I think it's got to be the 1990s.
Okay.
And I think I can live with it being it, but you need to slot the 50s next. Make sure you put the 50s as the most important in the very important category.
Okay. Drops down. 50 drops down. 1990s is the most important decade in football history.
It's a controversial one.
Closely followed by the 50s, 1870s, 1880s, 1960s, and 1980s. Okay. The least important being 1890s, 1940s, and the 2010s. I'm still not sure on that one. Okay, right. Happy with that then?
Yeah.
Happy. Right. If you want to do your own tier maker list, please let us know, and please send them over to us on our Twitter. Would be the best at TFHBS. You can read about a lot of these decades and more in our books, Football's 50 Most Important Moments and the History of Football in 90 Minutes as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any ideas what you'd like us to rank in the future, please let us know. Please like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.